사비로에 유모가 배지로에 양지 사비로에 사와 내가 유모가 노래 내가 시켜서 말이 뭘 닦아지고 이단 최지 지금 하다도 딱 이장을 다 또 이장을 딱 가기 좀까지 양은 나가 양은 정말 양은 유모가 갖고 이단까지 그래서 이 양이 딱딱히 요거를 이 쌀을 또 이다 캐시 소리를 근데 양이 계산을 한계를 이거에 이 강에 또 그래서 저기 라기 소리만 하고 왔다 딱 그렇게 맞지 않고서 다른 사람이 나왔으나 택하죠 단계 기타를 걸어 만들죠 이거 대답도 가능히 가려는 유머거든 척추고 뛰어간 바로 보듯이 농가 강화 계획 그리라기 유머야 통통 또 바로 보듯이 미바다고 해야지 딸라니 소비면 좀 예를 얻는 것이 약해야 누지타들이 시대 감성 이 노바 제일 때는 아주 너무 야 자연 다연 가리나 그 상황이 이제 아소도 같이 계시거든요. 다시 따로 있는 시리즈 바로만 시간하나 항상 오 가시랑 파트에서 호기심이 있는 배우는 딸 돌아요. 통통해요. 이는 맞게 되는 대하원이 이들 인이라면 제가 딸라기 라기 소리는 당연히 최고의 역시 하다고 그리고 말 인사체 따라잡고 해서
And so then it says in verse number 40, I look like an authentic Dharma practitioner, but inside my mind is not mixed with the Dharma. So on the outer level, we have taken the refuge vow and we have entered the gates of Buddhist practice. There's many people like that. And then when we come to the actual practice, it mainly consists of practicing meditation, shamatha and vipassana, or calm abiding and special insight. And the point of special insight or vipassana, this view, is to recognize the afflictive emotions. So this is what we practice when we meditate. And so then we do that, we understand that while we are in meditation, but then we are not able to actually bring this meditation, this experience into our daily activities. And so then this is what happens. The mind remains not mixed with the Dharma, and we only appear a Dharma practitioner. And so the fault of that mainly is due to not having developed immeasurable love. If immeasurable love does not arise, then also immeasurable compassion cannot arise. And so on the one hand, when we meditate, we feel that I know how to meditate, and we seem to meditate when we meditate, but then when we go out into life, again we are unmindful about our activities, and the afflictions remain hidden, just like a poisonous snake. The emotions remain concealed within me. And so these afflictions, the 6 afflictions, are naturally present in the mind, in a mind of self-grasping. And likewise, in a mind of love, the 6 paramitas are naturally complete. So self-grasping is like this poisonous snake, as you mentioned before. And the afflictions naturally arise from it. And these afflictions are hidden, but we all have them, self and others. Everyone has those afflictions, and we will all have them until we attain enlightenment. So there's no one who doesn't have them. Of course, we have them all. And so then it says, when I encounter difficulties, the signs of a bad practitioner are revealed. So then when a condition arises, because we consider ourselves as most important, and this condition can then triggers the afflictions. So for example, you run into a hardship, or you get sick, you suffer, and a very fierce affliction arises. So when such a condition arises, it is said that it is when such a condition arises, the level of one's realization, the level of one's practice will then be known. And so this is the point where practice comes in the face of difficult circumstances. So what's that circumstance, for example? In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it says, even if someone for whom one has cared as lovingly as one's own child regards one as an enemy, to love them even more, like a mother does a sick child, is the Bodhisattva's practice. So whatever difficulty arises, or when a very powerful affliction arises, then it might have been caused by another person who harms you. So this has triggered the affliction. And actually this person becomes just like a doctor for you. Also in the 37 practices it says, to those who desire a wealth of virtue, all those who do harm are like a precious treasure. So such a person who causes harm is actually very helpful to you, because he triggers an emotion in you, attachment or aversion. And so it comes up to the surface, and at that time you can see it with mindfulness. Otherwise, it always remains there, but you never actually see it. So that is why we say the level of one's realization and practice will be known in the face of difficult circumstances. For example, when anger arises, you instantly recognize, I'm being angry. And without this person, I would have never known. But it will still be there, remaining there hidden in the mind. We can never really see it. We can only see it if a condition triggers it. And so then this is the point where we take the condition, the negative condition, as the path. We practice with it. Basically just according to the 37 Bodhisattva practices. Normally we are completely unaware on an ongoing basis. We don't ever really notice our afflictive emotions, and we only really see them when they are triggered by a condition. It says, when I encounter difficulties, the signs of a bad practitioner are revealed. So these signs of a practitioner. So a practitioner is, we all are practitioners, we all are Sangha. And as Sangha, we must possess love for all sentient beings. And the biggest fault that a Sangha could possess is a lack of love and compassion for sentient beings. And the greatest of all of these faults is to develop hatred and anger towards others. And so therefore we supplicate, Guru, think of me, look upon me quickly with compassion, grant your blessing so that I can tame my own mind. We have, as being a Sangha, we have taken the Bodhisattva vow. And so we remind ourselves here that having taken the Bodhisattva vow, it is my root commitment to love all sentient beings. And when you look at yourself and you find I truly have love for all beings, then you have this one quality a Sangha must possess. And that is really ethical discipline. It is said, Milarepa actually said, giving up deceiving others, that is the ultimate, that is the actual perfection of ethical discipline. And in brief, now a Sangha or a Dharma a practitioner, the one we're talking about here, is someone who possesses love and compassion for all sentient beings. So therefore we supplicate to grant these blessings with compassion so that we can tame our own mind in this way.
生起的一份子，所以我应当要有慈心悲心，我应当爱众生，而且这样的爱呢，应当要朝着不虚假的、真实的爱众生这种方向去发展。就像是释迦牟尼佛所说的，真实的持戒就是表里如一的不虚假。那朝着这个方向去做，能够具足慈心跟悲心，就是真正的正心。
让用一把两个把握为这个手中去念那个读。 남의 동들하게 사회가 가리키면 취직이 가리키는데 취직장 말이에요. 오, 바로 너희들이 취직사지를 내면 좋아져요. 그냥 말이에요. 오, 그 성장도 그래. 네 취직은 성장도 성의들을 해. 말이에요. 가리키면 피해서요. 피해가 망고리어요. 성의들은 이 피해가 약하는 피해가 망하는 피해가 살린 피해가 피해가 나서 가만히 피해 저 나이 남을 약간 이 마인드 가리는 필지 가리는 자와 대비 답이 필요한 것이 또 남이가 또 가라가라더니 그래서 소리라서 왔다는 것들이 자꾸 몰라서 사회 죄는 놀라 실제 니마다 내 삶이 힘도 안 되고 선생님들 상황을 받들지는 주변에서 또 일본도 위에 쳤고 우리가 이거 저러는 거를 영어가 그래서 나는 일도 아베가 와서지 우리가 이제 이거에 특히 무슨 세나 예고 또 로마티 되는 소리 아베가 참 차와도 이렇게 많이 보여요. 치고 많이 몇 정도 된다는 거예요. 그러니까 단체로 때나 물론 차와만 있는 거예요. 감이 생기세마로가 따로 이세를 쏘는 것을 마지막에 사 충분한 것들이 시행하는 것이 sektor tertentu levato idzie aparte podzielił jeżeli mogą wiedzieć że kondy hamowa laga takie i dzieło janem dzikania dzieje pada dinami dzieje kama ojami dzieło i soalnya kesoman dzieło i koktela sobie dzieje Ini dia orang yang kita kenal dia ni ada setiap sangat setiap dunia ini dia orang dia tapi dia orang cuci sebab sama sini dia kalau orang kata jumpa sama dia yang hati saya tu setiap orang dalam dia tahu Santo Pietro, Salvatore, per lo dato non è tutto la novità, ma la proposta caro sapeva che mai non fa due volte stamattina o tanti giorni. Tutta la mattina arriva più di cose. Stamattina abbiamo centro dove abbiamo solo questo vuole
So then next we come to verse number 41, and it says, I do not realize my own bad faults. I maintain the form of a practitioner while engaging in non-dharmic pursuits. So here we are speaking really about any activity, worldly and or Dharma activity. So we are not only speaking about Dharma practice, actually it could be really anything. And no matter what you do, you are a noble Sangha, but also that does not necessarily mean that you're not allowed to engage in any mundane activity. For example, there are some people who make business. There's nothing actually wrong with that. That can also be a very beneficial activity. Many people bring a lot of benefits through their business to their country and to many people, and also they benefit the Buddha's teachings and so on. It actually could become an activity where you equalize self with others. But this is not what we're speaking about here in this case. Here, these activities that are not dharmic refer to those activities that disturb the minds of others and that cause difficulties for others, that stir up problems, various biased activities and so on. So these kind of activities are these non-dharmic activities here, because what accords with the Dharma are those activities that establish the minds of sentient beings in a state of peace and happiness. And if that is not accomplished, then what we do actually becomes harmful to them. And therefore, if it's harmful, it is not dharmic. And then it says, I am thoroughly habituated to the emotions and non-virtuous activity. So habituated means the afflictions arise naturally on their own. And that is because we are unmindful. This is the source of all negativity to arise. We've mentioned Lord Chigden Sumgön had said that there is actually only two states of mind, because some people say that we have virtuous, non-virtuous, and neutral states of mind. So there's three. But he says there's actually only two, because there is no real neutral state of mind. What we call neutral is really non-virtuous, because it is kind of a subtle state of unmindfulness, of ignorance. And even on that subtle level, it causes harm on that extent. So it not necessarily becomes something really coarse and obvious, like killing or abusing someone. But then still, as a Sangha, we must be very careful even when it comes to our subtle conduct, when it comes to not disturbing the minds of others and so on. And it is because we habituate to these subtle, small activities that eventually they accumulate and become very huge, significant activity, and disturb the minds of sentient beings. And then we, considering ourselves as most important, we disturb their minds, and we might even cause them to turn away from their devotion, and so on. And so then these afflictions are habituated, and then again and again I give birth to a mind of virtue, and again it stops. And so that is because we are mindful. We never really recognize what arises in the mind. We don't really look into it. So this verse here is actually an encouragement for us to be more mindful and look more closer at what arises in our mind. So we want to engage in practice. We practice, and then practice is lost again. So we practice and we want to practice, but then we become sluggish or we get sleepy and so on. And then we don't practice again. And so here, this virtue that we speak about is actually, the actual virtue is love and compassion for sentient beings, especially when they experience suffering. That's the supreme virtue. And in brief, that's the Dharma in essence. It is a compassion that is endowed with this kind of love. So, of course, if you want to accomplish something, virtues like a Dharma practice, if you think, I want to accomplish that, of course it is virtuous, but then also it is tainted by self-grasping. And this is not the ultimate or supreme virtue. The virtue we speak about here is the pure concern for all beings. For example, if you just recite a few Om Mani Padme Hum mantras, or if you just feel may everyone in this world be happy. Whatever slight activity you engage in, it is sealed with bodhicitta, the altruistic mind. But then our altruistic mind is usually very weak, and for example, we think that I want to take birth in Devachan and so on. So this is not the virtue we speak about here. The supreme virtue we speak about here is a sense of love and compassion for all sentient beings. So this kind of pure love and compassion, which is the ultimate virtue, is what actually benefits yourself and others. And so this love and compassion, this virtue is interrupted again and again, and it needs to be restored again and again. And so then it says, Guru, think of me, look upon me with compassion, grant your blessing so that I see my own faults. So to see one's own faults, especially as a Sangha, we must recognize all the afflictions, coarse and subtle, that arise in the mind. For example, you recognize this is jealousy and this is anger, and see it, recognize it like something poisonous arising. So when the afflictive emotions arise, often they are very subtle. In particular, actually, jealousy is very difficult to recognize, as it is a very subtle affliction. That is explained in a commentary on the prayer for excellent conduct, the King of Aspiration prayers. And it says that it is a very subtle, slight affliction, but it leads to really major, tremendous downfalls and destruction, because it destroys all of our merit. Sakya Pandita had said that it is an evil intention that exhausts, destroys all your roots of merit. And this evil intention is jealousy. And that is naturally always present in our mind in a subtle way, so we never really recognize it. But for example, it arises when there's a person that you don't like, then you will naturally say things to make them look bad and to humiliate them, and you will speak about their faults and criticize them and so on. So just naturally that is present in your mind. And also that will be different if it's someone who you like very much. So it's your activities basically
처음 얘기는 오고 이 말을 얘기 잘좀 잘 가만 얘네 용이나 있어서 좀 이런 일들이 나도 가만 이들은 가리나 될지 깨끗하게 라마다 소리 시를 듣다 보면 가만히 들어오니까 다 듣고 지금도 차도 라디오가 다 이제 다 이리라도 사실 제가 가지고 그런 가만히 가서 보면 다시는 되지 저도 와서 뭐 제가 이제 하고 내년에 그냥 있었을 거예요. 다 있는 라마 이 뭐를 이렇게 라마 나머지 가지야 그렇지 들리는 라마를 다음에 주기는 이거 라마마다 라마를 좀 진짜 라마를 들려다 이거만 통보를 사실 자가 지켜봐 라마 특을 거를 특을 매일은 그거 가리나 되고 매일 속도는 매일 가고 되고 내가 참 추이요 내가 되는 들이 추락이 라마를 봐야나 이렇게 봐야 가지고 라마는 도와도 그러면 라마를 봐야 이렇게 나라들이 대기보에 오는 또 밤을 치는 이제 하고 내 개인이 좀 괜히 하고 라마 제가 그거 찾을 거예요. 대기 모르는 거예요. 라마 도와주면 이렇게 가서 이쪽만 거예요. 이때는 그래야지 당신의 자기이 차당을 뭐 차당 같이 떠는 거예요. 되게 아빠는 시가 제대로 방한테 동성 라마는 뭐냐면 시장에 다시 복잡해서 말해 우리 쪽에 시장 때문에 당시 파마지가 그다에서 도시 시장이 받았다 보는 거예요. 하겠다. 도시 때문에 그만이 같이 와서 많이 있는 거예요. 그 절도 없이 갔다 지금 또
And so, for example, if there is a person that you don't particularly like, and so then this is not somebody speaking about and then relying on following a guru or lama, and so, for example, let's say you don't like that lama, and somebody says, "Oh, he's so wonderful," then you will not like that, and you will then actually point out, but actually he also has all of these faults, and so on. So this is extremely difficult to recognize, but if you really recognize it, it will go away instantly. This mind of jealousy. So this verse tells us to recognize this affliction. Next on verse number 42, it says, "As each day passes, I come nearer and nearer to death. As each day passes, my personality is more and more rigid." So from the moment we are born to our mothers, each and every day we approach death, come closer to death. So though I attend my guru, my devotion is steadily obscured. So the personality also becomes more and more rigid. So for example, you have those that are near you, that you love, like your parents and your families and friends, and also your gurus and your Vajra brothers and sisters. And rigid and also implies that you don't respect them and you disregard them and so on, mainly because you consider the self as more important. And so that then this is what makes them personality become more and more rigid. And then even though you actually love your parents, for example, you speak harshly to them and treat them in an unkind way. So this needs to be recognized. And then regarding the devotion that is steadily obscured, so we meet a guru and we develop some devotion to the guru, but we do not really think about the actual qualities of the Dharma, and often see the guru more like just a human being. And when we see him as a human being, then we also will see a lot of faults. For example, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is also actually a Nirmanakaya, a Buddha manifestation, but appearing in a human form and having a human body, also his activities must accord with the human beings. But then, from a Dharma perspective, it is really only when we give rise to devotion to that guru on the basis of understanding the qualities of the Dharma that our devotion will become authentic and stable. If we regard the guru more as a friend, then our devotion will not become stable. And so that is if we really understand the quality of the Dharma, and that is why we follow a particular spiritual teacher, then this Dharma connection will be much more beneficial, and faith and devotion will become stable. But if you see them as an ordinary person or like a friend, then many faults will actually come from that, because then the dualistic perception of self and other, and hope and fear, and attachment and aversion still remain the same. So then we supplicate, think of me quickly with compassion, grant your blessing so that I tame my wild nature. So for example, it is said that we should consider our Vajra brothers and sisters as very, very precious, because it says here, affection for Dharma companions and sacred outlook grow weaker and weaker. Actually, we should consider our Vajra siblings as even more dear, more precious than the siblings of our own parents, because we have a much more grave connection to these Vajra siblings. For example, in the secret mantra in the of 14 root downfalls. So in the 14 root downfalls of the secret mantra, the third one is to get angry at one's Vajra brothers and sisters. That's the third root downfall. And so then here this term devotion, what that really actually means is, first of all, trust in karma, and also an understanding that self-grasping leads to suffering, and it must be transformed through bodhicitta. And then also one understands that it is only through relying on the guru that we find this method, and then by practicing the practice blessing lineage. And that is why we consider all the Sangha as very precious. And of the three jewels, one is more precious than the other. The Buddha is precious, and the Dharma is more precious, and Sangha is really most precious. Through the Sangha we learn about the Dharma, the workings of karma, cause and effect, and so on. And the reason why the Guru is so precious is because without the Guru we will not find liberation. And so this understanding arises. A strong wish to become liberated from suffering, from self-grasping arises. And this then leads to a real appreciation or gratitude towards the Guru, and a wish to not really appreciate the qualities of the Dharma. So it is just like you are planting a flower and nurturing it. So basically it's rooted in a trust in karma. If you have that, then from that actually devotion naturally will arise. Trust and faith and devotion will naturally arise. Trust in the Dharma will naturally arise. And without that, without this trust in karma, real devotion will become difficult.
那么我们把上师只是当成是一般的自己的朋友来相处，这样的话就不能够对他产生真正的虔诚心，因为不能够去实践他所宣说的教法的缘故，这样的话就没有虔诚跟恭敬可言了。那当我们真正了解到上师对我们的这些教导的恩德，然后对于这些教法能够信受的话，对法产生信解性，那么真正对上师善知识的虔诚跟恭敬心就会随之而来。
Please take your seat. 10:50. 我们会场以及闭火区都是保持静谧的。
我们
19页最后4句。 等一下仁波切上座呢，会先唱诵4句祈请文，就是第19页的最后4句，所以大家可以先翻出来第19页的最后4句。座间仁波切莅临或者是离开，请都不要起立。仁波切希望我们保持禅修打坐以及持咒，请都不要起立。
So now we just said that in this supplication may my mind merge with the mind of the Guru, and the Guru's mind is a mind of love and compassion, and that's the mind of all the Gurus. And when that arises within your own mind stream, then your mind is actually not any different than the mind of the Guru. Also in the Drubchö Kagyu-lama Chipa, it says, I supplicate to the Guru that is bodhicitta. So if you think that the Guru is the Guru and bodhicitta is bodhicitta, that they are separate, then you will just regard the Guru as an ordinary human being. So in the previous verse he said, though I attend my guru, my devotion is steadily obscured. So when you see the guru as a human being, you will see just the physical form and will see a lot of faults. And so then next, affection for my Dharma companions and sacred outlook grow weaker and weaker. So those Dharma companions or Vajra brothers and sisters are considered to be very precious. And on a more like a larger scale, actually all sentient beings without exception have been one's parents. And when you really reflect upon that, then you will feel that this is really how it is. And when this feeling arises, then your mind becomes vast. This is also a skillful means to open up the mind. When this feeling arises of love, then your mind opens up. For example, you bring into mind anyone that you love very much, like your parents and so on. And then you think that since beginningless time, I've taken on limitless bodies. So there is no one who has not been my parent, for example. And when you think in this way, then actual love arises and pervades instantly as this feeling arises. The mind becomes vast. Rinpoche mentioned something in the Chinese language. There's a term that they always say that it means something like the mind becomes open and thus vast. And then in this way, this concept of me and self diminishes, and you will see everyone that you encounter as like a family member. So if you think about this over and over again, for example, then everyone in this room will appear as someone very close. And this kind of feeling then is able to subdue the afflictive emotions within the mind. So here when we speak about those Dharma companions, it is a reminder for us to remember that there is not a single being who has not been our parents.
그리고 상태 양태거리 상태도 무슨 뜻이냐 상태 이런 거 상태는 좀 상태를 딱 그거를 가지고 그거 예외를 갖다가 포마 필수 나는 좀 가져야 돼. 이는 갖고 오래 가지고 그거 막 계속 가봐도 되니 얘가 막 해야 하고 싸워야 하고 저래 이거요 말이 가서 그게 이제 시가 제동당 한테도 시정시 다시 못합니다. 이런 걸 이제 가고 비슷하고 이제 편에 행사 받기를 나도 당연히 하고 똑같이 또 전체 방식을 따서 상태를 양다고 너는 상태 누가 하고 하고 누가 하고 상태 그냥 그거 말이야. 그다음에 상태 이만 제가 대상을 피해서를 이 가능 그래서 맛이 이 파체적으로 와서 그만큼 이제 따지고 하고 그런 말이에요.
And so then there's also the more closer kind of companions that we have, and that refers to all of the religious practitioners of any religion in the world. No matter what religion one follows, actually, the inner meaning is really the same, and that is love and compassion. It just arises to different degrees, but there's really no religion that does not speak about love and compassion. It is only due to self-grasping that all the faults occur. So once we speak about any kind of religion or the Dharma, the point is to bring about the peace and happiness of the mind. And it is the only medicine that can bring about that. It is love and compassion. And so therefore, for this reason, any practitioner of any religion in this world should be regarded as a Sangha. These are like more closer companions. And then there is the very close companion, which are the Vajra brothers and siblings. And that refers to those individuals with whom we share a connection on the level of the view of secret mantra, Vajrayana, and the twofold bodhicitta. We have taken the bodhisattva vow, and that requires to cultivate the love of an enlightened being, which is a boundless mind of love, love that pervades all sentient beings, and recognizes that all beings have been one's parents, and this is what then pervades all sentient beings. And when such immeasurable love arises, one ultimately realizes the view or the natural state of the mind, or the ultimate truth. So the Vajra siblings are also those with whom we have shared instructions from a guru who has introduced us to the view of Mahamudra or Dzogchen, of the Vajrayana and so forth. So whatever you might want to call it, ultimately there's really only one view, one truth. And that is, all of these views are really in order to realize the non-dual nature of the mind. So whatever you call it, Mahamudra or Dzogchen and so forth, ultimately just speak about the natural state of the mind that is non-dual. And so this kind of relation we also share with those Vajra siblings. And this relation that we share with those Vajra siblings, with the Sangha, will be sustained throughout all lifetimes until we attain enlightenment, as we continue our path of practice of cultivating bodhicitta. And so ultimately we say that I take refuge in the Buddha until I attain enlightenment. So until enlightenment, because when you attain enlightenment, you realize non-duality. And until then, throughout all lifetimes, himself and other Vajra brothers and siblings will meet again and again in future lifetimes and establish a connection to each other and engage in practice together. So it is now those Vajra companions refers to those with whom one has been introduced to the ultimate truth and has taken bodhisattva vow together and so on. And now what we need to sustain when we speak about sustaining the bond to them is the love that we have for them. So for example, if it happens often that disciples get into an argument or get angry at each other, and when that happens, you should recognize, I have lost my love. I've gotten angry. I've transgressed my bodhisattva vow. So immediately you should apologize and confess and restore this bodhisattva vow. It is said throughout the 3 times of the day and the 3 times of the night. So at all times you sustain this samaya of bodhicitta, of love for your Vajra companions, and that's the actual samaya. Until you realize the state of non-meditation, which is to realize the nature of the mind where there is no more duality of someone who meditates and the meditator. And until then, again and again, we cultivate the relative bodhicitta of love and compassion. And when anger arises, you should confess and again restore the love that you had. And when love again arises, then the bodhisattva vow is restored. The samaya is not broken, because the bond really is this continuum of love that is to be sustained. And that is the samaya or vow that we say is so precious and must be sustained. So it is something that is actually it can be broken very easily. When you get angry with someone, very easily you transgress this vow, you break it. But it is said that it is like a golden garland, a golden chain. It is broken very easily, but also it is fixed very easily. And that is why bodhicitta, an example of bodhicitta, it is said it is like gold, because it is unchanging. And so, therefore, when transgressions occur, such as getting competitive or jealous and so on with Vajra Dharma brothers and sisters, then you should really develop some fear and think that now I really have been cut off from the life force vein, the life force channel of liberation, and I must restore this over and over again. And so in brief, what this really comes down to is the practice of patience. If you practice patience, actually no real transgressions will actually occur. If you sustain patience, you will therefore be able to sustain an ongoing state of love and compassion for others. And that is the actual vow or the samaya. And so this is here as a reminder, because this is a point that often disciples are not aware of. And so not knowing that, they don't recognize the preciousness of a Dharma companion. And then we supplicate, Guru, think of me, look upon me quickly with compassion, grant your blessings so that I tame my wild nature. So these 4 lines here are actually very, very important. And so this taming of the wild nature here, this wild nature, It refers to, for example, those who are close to you, like your parents or your teachers. You are unable to show them any respect. And the reason why you cannot respect them is because of pride. And pride is by nature ignorance. And if pride is present, anger will also arise, because when they do something that slightly doesn't go your way, then instantly you get angry. So often we ask ourselves, what has happened to me? Why is it like that? It is because of pride. You feel I'm tired, I did this and I did that. So you take some pride and then anger arises. So it's important to recognize those feelings and the fault in those emotions. And when pride and anger are present in the mind, then true devotion to the Guru will not arise within our mind. Then actually you become you're completely lost. You have nothing at all. Wherever you go, you will not get along with anyone. And so if you find yourself in such a state, it's very important that you take a look at your own mind and really examine it and recognize that this situation is a sign that of the presence. It shows, indicates the presence of anger and pride. So that's why it is important to really take a look at your mind over and over again. And so then it says, so devotion is steadily obscured, and when blessings that are tamed by wild nature. So it is like you become like a dried tree, like a dried out tree. When you don't pour any water into its root, then the branches and foliage will wither, and then it breaks very easily. The branches will break very easily. So it is like someone who has lost all their patience. For example, someone who goes to school and has lost all their patience, then when the slightest thing happens, they get very angry, and then they shoot a lot of people, and then they kill themselves and things like that. So this is what happens when you lose your patience. So before that happens, you should recognize the afflictions as they arise, and love and compassion is like water, that not just this stream. It refers to the taming this wild nature here refers to again and again meditating on cultivating patience and loving kindness and compassion.
이렇게 양다는 것은 상상들이 마음의 독성의 진창사, 상상들이 아까 병용 양상사, 이 상상들 무엇 무엇이 양상의 비, 그런 것을 내도 받아나고 나무치고 차와치고 제과제과 이렇게 쓰는 사람 화해야로 토라요 이런 상황다나 사대답에 가르쳐 그래서 제대로 사지 용기 이런 게 사지 그런 동안은 맞이부터 말라 제대로 진짜로 좀 터져요 세계는 세계는 한번 말이요 지금에서 아무튼 매 가봐서 사만하고 남만한 이해에 예를 들어서 전직의 동사 이게 너무 좋아하나 야 와서 저기 양상하는 개인적인 그 많이 보는 뭐 가게 쳐보려 뭐지 뭐 많이 보는 약간이 가게 되는 거예요 어디서 또 좋았지 뭐예요 그래서 보니까 이거가 무엇도 있다고 이해가 다 맞지는 좋아합니다. 예수님이 같이 이것도 받아서 옆으로 그래서 초반에 마지막 생각이 가까이 답변을 계속 차로 올리게 그리고 세로 가면 이거 소막을 와서 양이 가르치지 동사 나무도 가르쳐 생기게 받지 나지랑 한 번에 하는 거예요. 이렇게 와서 이렇게 이것도 봤다, 나것도 봤다. 생각이 상당히 이게 다 이렇게 나와 있는 게 같은 제보도 사자가 상하도 다 제보로 와 있어야 사법적인 좋았어야 맛이 제대로 제대로 많이 봐. 하나들이 뭔가 가지고 딱 그래.
And the next verse, number 43. Says, I have taken refuge, aroused bodhicitta, and made supplications, but devotion and compassion are not born in the depths of my heart. Since I give lip service to Dharma action and spiritual practice, they become routine and don't touch me. So, for example, we practice the Ngunro, the preliminaries, and we accumulate 100,000 prostrations and 100,000 vajrasattva and so forth. And then we complete those numbers, and then we say, now I'm done, I have completed the Ngundro, I finished the Ngundro. But then what kind of feeling actually arises in the mind? Actually, not much, not a great feeling arises. So actually, why do we have to accumulate 100,000 prostrations? So before we actually do a physical prostration, we must cultivate faith and devotion in the mind. And faith arises when you understand the qualities of the three jewels. And to understand that, you first have to understand the suffering of the three lower realms. And then you have to understand that all of that suffering arises from the afflictive emotions, and these afflictions arise from self-grasping. And then you recognize that the teachings are a method to eliminate self-grasping. And so for this reason the Buddha had taught the Dharma, and from the Dharma the Sangha had emerged. So in this way you recollect the qualities of the three jewels. And you then understand, for example, the quality of a Buddha as being, the Buddha possesses an omniscient mind and love and compassion for beings, and he has the power to protect beings and so on. So as you prostrate, sometimes you remember the suffering of the three lower realms. And sometimes when you prostrate, you remember the qualities or the benefits of liberation. And so in this way you complete your prostrations. Or for example, when we took the Nyingne vows, in the vow verse it says, who is like those who are like a great elephant, and those who did things and caused them to be done, and so on. So when you really understand the quality behind those words, then just reading those words alone will actually generate an incredible feeling in your mind. and you will remember all of the hardships that the Buddha underwent only for the benefit of sentient beings, and you remember the Buddha's kindness, and then when you see an image of the Buddha, it will bring tears to your eyes. And if that happens, then you have really actually achieved the true purpose of having taken refuge. And then when it comes to cultivating bodhicitta, here the point is to recognize that all beings have been your parents. And then you would have a feeling of, for example, when you are with a lot of people in a room, you would feel that they really are like my family. Or when you come to Vajrasattva, then the purpose of the ultimate thing to be gained when you purify obscurations is to purify your body, speech, and mind. And so you remember the Buddhas in this way again and again. And for example, you develop such a love to the three jewels that whenever you bring them to mind or you call them, a strong feeling arises. For example, if there's a person that has some difficulty and you crying for help. So if you're really in a lot of trouble, then you're crying for help, you're calling out for the three jewels. And that's actually one habit that the Tibetans also have, that even if the slightest thing happens, immediately they are able to call for the three jewels. They can say that. And if you can remember them, then their protection surely is unfailing in this life, in future lives, and in the bardo. But that requires that feeling to arise. If that feeling doesn't arise, then it will just become lip service, an accumulation of numbers. So no matter what practice you do, it's very important that you get to the essence, the crux of that practice. What's the whole point of that practice? For example, if real devotion has arisen, then immediately you will be able to fold your hands, to join your palms in prayer. And that is, for example, like a physical prostration that purifies the obscurations of the body. And then when you recite the supplication, you purify the obscurations of speech. And in your mind, when you cultivate love and compassion, that purifies self-grasping. And so in this way, you are bringing together your body, speech, and mind into one. For example, as you prostrate and take refuge in the three jewels. And then a real feeling arises, a real benefit arises.
capacity taken by the Nampi, the
So then if you have this feeling arising within you, as if, for example, offer prostrations, then even just offering 10 prostrations or so becomes very meaningful. And otherwise, if you, even though you might accumulate 100,000, there's not much benefit if that feeling doesn't actually arise. And so then it says in the end, Guru, think of me, look upon me quickly with compassion, grant your blessing so that whatever I do becomes dharma. So how can we make everything that we do become dharma? It is when altruism has arisen in your mind, then everything you do naturally becomes the 6 paramitas. So it is a wish of wanting to benefit others. And that is really the essence of Dharma practice, thinking that may I be of benefit to all sentient beings. And so even actually when you engage in a mundane worldly activity, it also can become Dharma practice if you never separate from the wish to benefit others throughout the 6 times of day and night. If you have this altruistic intention, then just naturally whatever you do with body, speech and mind will become Dharma practice or virtues. Milarepa said that when this is the instruction for walking and moving about to become circumambulation. And then there is the instruction for dreaming and sleeping to become luminosity. And then the instruction for eating and drinking to become a Gana Chakra feast offering. So for example, how does that happen when we eat? So your body actually consists of many millions of different microorganisms. And that's really true. It's not just you, this body. There's many other little life forms there. And so Dharma practice, now what does this term really mean? It means that we have to change our mind, transform our mind. And how do we do that? It is by cultivating love and compassion. If we transform the mind, it means that by all means we have to get rid of self-grasping. And we do that by cultivating loving kindness and compassion. So the ultimate actual Dharma, and the Buddha had said, is to tame your own mind. So we give it many different names and we classify the Dharma in many different ways, and we say that this is Dharma and this is not Dharma and so on. This is practice, this is not practice, or this is a mundane worldly activity, this is not Dharma. But actually anything could possibly be Dharma, and depending on your motivation, depending on what all phenomena depend on how you see them, on your state of mind. And so therefore also it is the intention that determines virtue and non-virtue. And therefore if the motivation is virtues, then whatever you do with body, speech and mind will naturally become dharma or virtue. And on the other hand, if the motivation is selfish, then whatever you do, even if it is virtuous, will only become half virtue and half non-virtues. So in order for everything that you do to become a dharma, you must never separate from a mind of love and compassion.
이 수도라는 보다 한기사들이 제일 이게 대성을 싹들이 다 체험을 받쳐버려요. 나의 사관이 앞에 대해서 그거는 사진이 우리 취미로 딱 그것까지 내가 잡나 그것도 보다 가지고 오 그게 형한테 빨리 앞에 다시고 또 보스면 그 보스가지고 제일 그게 보스면 그것도 겨울하고 그것도 아무것도 안 내가 가지고 제가 학교에 이해를 딱 상고요. 그래서 이 마찬가지니 이 다시 이노 저를 빠지는 가발이 하나씩 앞에 받으면 다시 그렇게 다시는 점심시간 그때마다 신체 봐야 되는 것도 내가 이미 그냥 초시했고요. 아마요. 근데 또 우리가 막 교육이 상태에서 싸먹었다. 교육이 있고 말이에요. 조금 상태에 나다. 교육이 앞에 요리 상태에 대해 나도 해보고 있는데 미리 또 미리 마크를 또 그렇게 되면 무슨 관점으로 말이에요. 그래서 마이마 드리라고 가만 나가다가는 사마라도 붙었나? 사마들이 녹아도 차도 오면 그래가지고 뭐래 이제 비자 주는 거를
So for everything that you do to become the Dharma, you must never separate from the motivation, the mind of love and compassion. And then even a seemingly unvirtuous action actually can become virtuous. So this should be quite simple to understand. And then the next verse, number 44, says, all suffering comes from desiring happiness for oneself. Although it is said that Buddhahood is attained by considering the welfare of others, I arouse supreme bodhicitta while I concentrate on my own desire. Not only do I not benefit others, I casually cause them harm. So now we have understood that the root of all suffering is self-grasping. And Buddha had taught about the importance of cultivating an altruistic mind in order to eliminate it. And so, even though we have understood that, although that is what is said, that Buddhahood is attained in this way, I still only concentrate on my own desires. So we have to really look at our own mind. Because what determines virtue and non-virtue is the state of mind and not so much the outer activities. Because it is said that even though the outer activity might reflect a seemingly virtuous activity, whether or not it is really virtuous depends on one's motivation. So something might look like a virtuous practice, like something good to do, but whether or not this is actually the case is something you can only know by seeing your own mind. For example, now I'm giving teachings to you on the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, and I'm taking away your weekend. I'm wasting your weekend, and that's the time when you actually don't work. And then you come here and during all these hardships for the teachings. And so now if I really think about it, now what's the whole purpose? If my motivation would be that if I come here then and teach, then I might get some money from them. So if that would be my motivation, then the negativity, the negative karma, the fault in that would be just really incredible. It would be an immeasurable fault. So that should not be the motivation, but the motivation should be one of really undefiled, uncorrupted love. And then you have the real quality of the Buddha, and if you have that, you have the quality of the Dharma. Then I think that all of you come here enduring so many hardships, and you must gain something from this. And if you only hear about the workings of karma, cause and effect, and the preciousness of love and compassion, then already that will open up your mind stream. So then if I'm able to open up their minds in this way by giving them teachings, then I feel that at least they will not be at loss. So basically, whatever you do, it is important to really examine what is the ultimate result of this action. Because if you don't examine that, then it is as though, like it says here in this text, then you will just concentrate on the pursuit of your own desires. So when within the bottom of your heart really uncorrupted love is not present, then your activities on the outer level might appear as virtuous, but in your heart you have no real wish to benefit sentient beings. And so if you really have that wish to benefit sentient beings, you actually will, because our minds, the basis of our minds are actually one, and they will feel your wish of wishing to benefit them. that will also arise within them. So this is something that especially masters, the teachers have to consider, but not just them, it also is between the disciples, for example. We must possess really pure, uncorrupted love for one another. And then, even though it might happen, for example, due to karma, that you give someone some medicine and then that turns into poison, but that actually is still not your fault, even if that person is hurt, because you had a good motivation, and that also was karma. So if that is not within your mind, is uncorrupted love, and if there's a hidden selfish agenda in your mind, if your intention is not pure, then just naturally, without even intending, you will cause harm toward others, and clearly no benefit. And so then, regarding the Buddha's teachings, we speak about many different lineages and many different traditions, and there exists a lot of debate between them. But these discussions are really only in order to refine each other's understanding of the Dharma. It is said that the great masters must uphold the lineage, and simple-minded people like ourselves should not fall into biased views. So for them it is necessary to discuss, to uphold the lineage, but if we bring these words of discussion into our practice, we might go wrong and think that, for example, only my tradition, only my religion is good, and the others are wrong. For example, you might say that Christianity is so bad. So you have devotion toward your own tradition on the one hand, but then you also criticize others. And it is this negative state of mind actually that is what you don't want to have in your mind. That is what's really bad actually. Because that is a root of attachment and aversion and the cause of disharmony between anyone, your family and so on. So you can continue to engage in your own practice, you can practice your own path, but you should not criticize others for following their own path, because we enter certain paths and religions due to karma that we already have from previous lives. So, for example, in one family, if people practice a different religion, we should still respect each other, practice our own, and still think that they probably also have good qualities. So this is important because only in this way you will be able to live together, coexist harmoniously, and stay together. Otherwise, if we criticize each other, it will always lead to conflict. For example, if some people say, for example, a Christian might say, if you take refuge in Buddhism, you will go to hell. So actually that is not a good thing to say, because it causes a lot of harm. For example, if somebody has entered the path and then you say that don't do that, then it is like somebody's mind who has already been opened, then becomes corrupted in some way. So it is
마카만을 봐 공도 태어나는 거 깨끗했단 말이에요. 그러면 그때는 나 기지가 또니 마도 제대 해파였고 마 그때는 또 그때는 나와 마음을 성 이기는 거예요. 비리도 비리를 걸었다면 시작해 버리고 내가 이렇게 들었다고 하면 이 그냥
So then when the blessing said that I exchange myself for others. So now regarding the now coming back to this biased views that we mentioned. Just naturally, if you have these biased views in your mind, harmful thoughts will naturally arise, and aversion in your mind will naturally arise. And it is this negative state of mind that is actually the mistake, and not what other people do. There is basically 3 states of mind that you don't want to have in your mind, and that is covetousness, and harmful thought and wrong view. For example, it is to think of covetousness is thinking that my own is the best. And of course it is okay to have devotion and to see the qualities of the 3 jewels, but then at the same time you should not criticize others and humiliate them and so on. That will only lead to a lot of argument and criticism, and people will get into conflict. And this often happens even between different traditions and spiritual lineages. And a lot of difficulties are caused in the name of religion due to these kind of biased views. So then the Dharma, which actually is intended to bring about benefit, in fact causes a lot of harm. So what's most important here is to cultivate a pure perception, love and compassion for sentient beings, and a pure perception toward higher beings or religious beings. And that is really then the essence of whatever you practice. So you can continue to do your own practice, but at the same time do not criticize what others do, because many faults come from that. And basically there is only 2 fields of reference. There is all the religious followers in this world who are Sangha, and then there are all the sentient beings who are our parents. And if you only hold on to these 2, your mind really is able to abide like space, and you will be able to respect others, all others. And then if you respect others, they will also feel that, and then in turn they will feel affectionate and respect you in return. So a pure perception is really most important. And so then it mentions about exchanging myself and others. That is to put others before oneself. And so that doesn't mean that you have to sleep outside and give them your house, but it means that you give up your intention to mainly care about yourself, and to understand that the root of all happiness in this and future lives is the altruistic mind, is others. And if you understand that, then wisdom really arises. And when wisdom arises, you know, you are aware of what happens around me, what do the people around me need. Is my behavior affecting them negatively or not, and so on. So in this way, you're in your mind you're putting others before self, and in your activities you're actually equalizing self with others. So of course, if you are able to do it, you put others before yourself, but it's very difficult to do that in your activities. You can maybe begin doing that when you engage in smaller activities, for example, when it comes to eating food, and somebody's hungry, then you put others before yourself and give them your food. But often it's very difficult to apply that to more significant activities. So in general, you put others before the self in your mind, but in your activities you equalize self with others. In your mind you recognize that my true friend is altruism, and as you practice